Yeah, and a task which is delete, task type. This is how you define a task. Clean. We define a class name clean with the type delete, and then what we do, we simply delete this root project dot build dir. This directory is deleted. And so this is like a script kind of coding, that you can do in Gradle. And this is our module level um, Gradle file, as this is in the module app module. It's written here. Here you see we define in Gradle, as we said, this SDK version, compile SDK version, the version of the build tools. This is the version of our build tool, 25.0.3, and uh, default config. Uh, Parameter defines minimum SDK version. This, for example, this app is going to support the minimum SDK level of 15, but the target SDK for which it is being designed is 25. So for 25 to 15, it's going to support the phones which contain the SDK versions between 25 to 15. Version code, as we have already defined, version code is actual version of our Android app. This will be incremented with our every new release or build. And then we have a version name. Version name, as we said, is only for the customers, to see, for example, if they want to keep track of the functionalities that were provided to them in the previous release and what are present in the new release. And we can, for example, even with the version name, instead of a string, we can define a string of float. I mean, and we can also define a string um, which is more kind of descriptive of the functionalities added or removed, of the, or even more kind of descriptive about the new release that we get. And then here we have dependencies, which directories um, it, the control should go and kind of compile the static.jar files, located under these directories. For example, in include, or it should also compile the libs directory. Android has compile, we can also define such kind of you know kind of links, and to download the dependencies from or the depending functionalities from these links, like this. And then we can also, for example, define here under this Android, inside this Android tab, for example, here we can define if we want to for example, multiple APKs. As we said, APKs are actually the executables. So for example, why would we define we need to compile multiple APKs, is because, for example, for certain kind of settings, or certain kind of, for example, versions of, for example, these uh, this Android, what do we say, the CPU or whatever versions, like you have. So in the same way, for different kind of iOS versions, we can, for example, compile multiple SDKs. Then we have Gradle wrapper. Gradle wrapper is just defining here some useful path. For example, this is where the Gradle zip is located. Gradle is actually a zip kind of it's a zipped plugin, which contains, for example, all the resources that we need to install Gradle in Android Studio. So we can download this Gradle. This is a version of the Gradle, this Gradle zip file, separately from the Android Studio, and install it into the Android Studio. And then we have this file. It's not so important. Then Gradle.properties file. Here we can define certain properties, and then we have settings.gradle file. For example, what